Republican National Committee Communications Director Sean Spicer. Sean, I just had Dr. Carson here a second ago saying he's getting the feeling with stuff that went down in Colorado that it's a rigged system, that it's not fair to this guy. What do you think?
Well, all the plans that each one of these states is following, whether it's a convention, a caucus, or a primary, were submitted to the Republican National Committee over a year ago, and each of those plans was made available to all the candidates that were in the race at that time. So candidates and campaigns have been well aware of what process each state is using to both allocate and select its delegates, and this is part of the process. So Colorado is known for a long time what the process is, by how those delegates were going to be elected.
All right, so you're quite right. Going into this, we knew how various states handled their delegate apportionment. We also knew about uncommitted slates. But it does rankle some who look at this and say, well, it's not really direct vote then. Coloradans didn't have, maybe for various reasons that I don't know, to not have a separate primary or caucus where the voters would weigh in. What do you say to that and concerns that maybe the Trump camp seizes on this and says, if I don't get this thing, it's because I was wrong?
Well, I think quite the opposite. The process has been out in the open for everybody to see and look at for almost a year now. So everybody knew what the process were by which each of these states was going to both allocate and select their delegates. And they have teams that are out there understanding that and working with the delegates. It's the same process that we've had for, literally a century in terms of our party, of how we've worked. Some states go by convention, some states choose a caucus, and some states a primary. It's no secret. How the delegates are allocated is wide open for everybody to look at. So not understanding that is one thing, but it's hardly rigged when it's done in right out in the open.
You know what's weird, maybe just taking it in on the Republican and the Democratic side, Sean, is this notion that a guy can win the popular vote and still end up losing the delegates. It's happened before, a key primary, I think, in Nevada, that Hillary Clinton had won, that Barack Obama ended up getting the delegates. We've seen it in states, Louisiana, for example, that Donald Trump won, where it looks like right now Ted Cruz will win the delegates. So it does happen. But does it give you pause that that's weird?
Well, remember, there's a big distinction. In some of these places, Donald Trump still has a bound delegate. In other words, someone who may not be particularly, loyal to a candidate runs and wins a slot that was allocated to a candidate. Those delegates still remain bound. So let's be very clear. If Donald Trump won a bound delegate, that individual, regardless of whether they like him or not, or are supporting another candidate or not, are still bound to vote for him. That's a major distinction that is important. Just because they didn't get their person elected to that slot doesn't mean that that vote doesn't stay with them. The rules require bound delegates to vote the way that their state bound them. So it doesn't matter how they personally believe things went. And in some states, again, part of the goal is to elect delegates. That's how the system's always worked. Now, I know in the last couple of decades it hasn't mattered as much, but the point, Neil, is that the process has been the same for over a century. And I think people have to remember that. It's not that there's anything different. It's just that for the first time in over 40 years, we haven't had that presumptive nominee early in the process.
Good point. And I was covering it a century ago. That's how old I am. All right, Sean, thank you very, very much. Very helpful.